All right, so we're here at Meldrum's Paint in Ithaca, New York, and they are an awesome paint company. Actually, I think they originally were in Cortland. Was it in Cortland? And they opened up in Ithaca. So we are here looking at barn colors, which is really fun. And we had gotten a bunch of stains, and I think they were a little bit too brown. This is our barn reference, which we think is really dope. And it looks like we're gonna go with Arbor Coat, which we just found out Arbor Coat's changing their name, but this is their exterior paints, which we've used on the Meadow House as well. And you could get semi-transparent, semi-solid, and solid. And we went with a solid color on the Meadow House, but we're gonna go with a semi-solid color on the barn, just so it gives it that more rustic feel. You could see the wood grain a bit better. And we won't have to constantly be out there staining it over and over again, because we're going more with the semi-solid. If we went with a semi-transparent, you'd have to be out there more frequently staining it. But we like this rustic taupe and this Fairview taupe, and we thought it would be really cool to get like this butterscotch yellow for the accents. So around the windows, maybe in the doors. So I think we're gonna go with this Desert Sunset, which is a bit more orangey. And we think that will play off nicely because the barn is really close to the Meadow House, and I think that these are nice and complementary because it has this warm brown tone. And then we'll also do a yellow marigold, which is a slightly lighter, but we could maybe just change up the yellow a bit, even though it's in the same family, with whether we do like doors or windows or things like that. So those are the ones that we're gonna get. You could see here on the solid stains, the difference in the color. Like these feel a little bit grayer to me. And these are very similar, the Fairview and the rustic taupe. I mean, the semi-solid seems almost the same, but when you look at them on the wood, this is a bit grayer, and so you never know. We just have to actually put them on the...
It also depends on the amount of coats you do on.
Yeah.
They say 1 coat on this, 2 coats for this one will really
get you the color. But yeah, I think we're probably gonna do 1 coat. That's gonna be easier on us. And we'll see how different these look, because you know we're looking at them here on a piece of paper. Once they're on the hemlock wood, it'll look totally different. Well, I think we made some progress, or maybe you.
This is the biggest trellis in the world. Oh no, it's our barn. Yeah, so when we bought this property, we were gifted with this barn. This used to be the building where they operated the nursery out of, and they had a little break room here on the left where it's all green right now. And like on the other half of that area was a huge area for soil. They would come in to this big door here, the 16-foot wide, 14 feet high door. The concrete's even enforced to 6 inches. They would drive a big truck in there and just offload a bunch of soil and then scoop it into that big bay.
Yeah, you had to clean out a lot of the soil in the beginning.
Yeah. This barn is 40 by 60 and it's 16 feet tall. So it's huge. And we didn't necessarily know what we had when we first saw this, but as soon as I started to learn more about building, I started to realize what was here. And if you were to build a barn like this in today's climate of building materials and labor, I think this thing is gonna be at least $500,000 to put together. There's just like over-engineered trusses in there, 2 foot on center. It's the biggest truss you can buy for a roof, and it has a 2nd floor addition on it too. So it's just incredible that we have this. And the only thing that we didn't like about this, and what our initial reaction was, is because we really gravitated towards these old barns in the area. They had a lot of character, but the problem with those old barns usually is that they're falling apart. They, you know, if they had a new roof installed, they might be okay, but you know, it's just not a solid structure that will last like for millennia. So what we decided to do is we didn't want to spend any time down here or even film this direction, because the barn just looked like a commercial building. It's like very cold, and this is the original metal that was on the building.
I called it a Monopoly piece.
You call it a Monopoly piece because it's not very, you know, the overhangs are relatively small for such a big building. There's just a lot of weird little design things about it. But it makes a lot of sense to put metal on a barn. Like this will last a very long time. And, you know, over time, The downsides might be that, you know, it might get dented like this. I think this actually happened from when we tried to get our wood into the barn that we're using now to clad the barn.
Well, there's a lot of good things about metal. I mean, it's fireproof, it lasts a long time. And when we were doing price costs, the price of the metal was around the price of wood. So essentially we're changing this into a board and
so we're
batten.
cladding it with wood now to give it more character and to bring some of that like old barn vibes to our property. But yeah, I would say...
And match the meadow house.
And match the meadow house. As you can see, it has a board and batten finish on it. But that wood is planed, and for this building, we're gonna keep the wood more rough. Metal or wood, I think metal is faster to install. It makes sense, but for our aesthetics, it just felt naked, cold. The color is a little off. So we decided to start renovating the barn. I thought it would be a lot easier than it actually turned out to be. It's really time consuming. When we ordered the wood for the barn, we didn't necessarily know what kind of board and batten style we wanted to end up with. So we just ordered raw hemlock, and here you could see a piece of it. But you could see that this board is gonna get cut to a little over an inch, or almost an inch. It varies actually, because when the saw goes across this, sometimes it cuts a little thicker and sometimes cuts a little thinner. But you could see the roughness of this board here. So the first thing that we had to do was we wanted to use this as board and batten, but as soon as we put rough and overlap it with rough, the problem we had was that there's gonna be huge gaps here, and we had to get rid of that. We needed to have a good tight seal in order to make sure that there's no bugs or even light or anything else like water getting through here to the other side. In order to get the wood in a place that we wanted it to be, we had to plane it and make it smooth.
But we had gotten all the wood prior to that.
But we got all the wood prior to that. And this is like between 200 and 250 boards that are 16 foot wide. No, 12 inches wide.
12 inches
16
wide,
feet long.
Yes.
Sorry, I messed it up. So in order to get those smooth, we need to plane them. Planing is a process where you basically feed it through a machine that has rollers, and it has 3 knives, and it just scrapes wood off in order to get it smooth like this is.
So how many passes did you have to do? Because your dad came in.
Each pass you could really crank it up and take a lot off at the same time, but then your knives get dull really quick. It might get stuck. So, you know, you're thinking about maybe a 1/16 of an inch would be generous. A 32nd of an inch would be more realistic with the planer that I have. So I have maybe like a $700 DeWalt planer, kind of like homeowner planer. But we pushed this thing to the test, and it's 13 inch wide, and we were shoving 12 inch wide boards through it, and it made it. I mean, it was screeching at the end of it because some of the bearings were like worn out. So I had to replace lots of parts in the meantime in order to keep this thing functioning. But eventually we've made it, and the result is that, so for the battens, we had to plane them on both sides, because the batten is the part that goes on first in our case, because we're doing reverse board and batten. We're not doing a traditional board and batten. Traditional board and batten would be, you put your board up on the purlings, which are these horizontal lines, and then you have gaps in between the boards, so then you'll have to cover it with like a batten. But then the problem is that in our case, it's like we wanted a really wide board. We wanted the widest board almost possible, because this building is so huge. And if you put like tiny boards on it, it will make it feel like it's a lot larger. When we went reverse board and batten, all of a sudden now you see the full board. You get more width out of it.
And we did the same with the meadow house, except we used 10 inch wide boards there.
Yes, so the meadow house is like a miniature version, and it has 10 inch wide boards. And it would be strange if this barn had boards that looked smaller than the house that was sitting right next to it. Doing reverse board and batten is interesting too, because at any point, like I'm using screws to attach this to the building, at any point I could take the board off and replace it, or do maintenance on something that was behind here. Maybe there's electric behind here, or like a vent. And you know, if it's the other way around, you'd have to pull the battens off first, and then you can get the board off. it also creates actually an airspace behind this, as you can see. Like I can fit my whole hand behind here. And this is great for airflow, so that if there's any water that makes it past my board and batten here, it's gonna be able to dry out, at least for this section, because the other sections of the barn, they're uninsulated, so it's just gonna be board and batten. And on the inside actually over there, it will look really nice. It will look like traditional board and batten, because if you look at the back of this, you know, now you got your boards and then the battens.
Yeah,
seem
so
like
we
they're
chose
on
to
top.
do a solid stain on the outside, but on the other side, we're using raw wood, so it's
Yeah.
raw on the inside in the
So
barn.
to continue talking about the wood, the other issues that we had. So first of all, we needed the battens to be the same thickness, because if they were to be different thicknesses all over the place, then it wouldn't sit off the building at the same depth. So all of these needed to be planed on two sides, so that when this sits, we have a level plane across it. Now then, the boards is a different story. We left this raw, and that way we get this really nice wood texture here. And I think it actually is more resilient to the elements as well, because it just has more texture.
It also took the stain a little bit better that it was raw.
Yeah, so one other thing we had to do before getting to the staining part is, one thing I didn't realize is that if you order lumber and you let it dry, even though you order 12-inch wide boards, some boards are gonna be 11, some boards are gonna be exactly 12, some of them are gonna be 11 and a half. So what I didn't realize until we put the boards up on that building is that some boards were 10-inch wide on the top, but 9.5 on the bottom. So you'd have a taper in the board. And you can imagine that if it overlaps the batten on the top, but it starts to shrink on the bottom, all of a sudden you have a gap, and some of it might not even overlap. So one thing that I wanted to do for this building, since it's so big, I wanted to be more precise. So I actually cut all the boards to width to make them 11.5, because then all boards will be the same width. Now, all this was a huge amount of work, and I didn't realize how much work it actually would be. And we were really fortunate that my parents were traveling and they were visiting us, and my dad actually helped me with a lot of that planing and cutting, because as you can imagine, 16 feet long boards, you're not just gonna do that on your own and shove it through a machine.
Yeah, and I started off with the planing, and oh God, it's
Yeah, you helped for a little bit to get it started and to
it's-
figure out the technique, but it's ideal to have one person on each end.
Yeah.
And then you need to kind of get into a rhythm. But we were planing and working on this for probably 2 to 3 weeks.
The whole time he was here, yeah.
Yeah.
The whole time he was here, and then
And it's hard labor too, because those boards are not light.
I would
And
say that the only silver lining of it is after planing, when we had to stain all the boards, it seemed like a piece of cake.
yes, you really want to get to the staining part. But yeah,
Just
I mean,
moving
the
it
amount
along.
of freaking sawdust that we created by just processing this wood, we saved a little bit of money doing that. But if you can order your boards planed from the sawmill, obviously I think that's a lot better of a choice. We didn't realize we needed to. So let's get to the staining part. Problem is that if we just leave this wood untreated on the building, that would look really beautiful. But the problem is that the sun is gonna react to the wood, the rain, it's gonna make it look weathered. And the problem is that it will look different on this side, and it will look different on that side, and it will look different where the overhangs are. And you're just getting a really inconsistent look. And we didn't want to have that inconsistency. We wanted the wood to last the longest that we could possibly have it last. So eventually we decided to stain it. You could choose different kinds of stains. You have semi-transparent, transparent, or solid stains. And with the transparent stains, the problem is, yes, you'll see more wood grain, but it won't last as long as a solid stain. And the difference between a stain and a paint is that the stain actually soaks deep into the wood, whereas a paint is like a layer that's on top of the wood. So we ended up going with a solid stain. And they recommend you to do 2 coats. We did 1 coat on the boards for now. And then once the building is up, we'll do another coat next year to really let this settle in. And I actually, even though this is a solid stain, you could still see the wood grain, or at least some of the texture. So, and even here on the batten, you could see that this is planed, but you could still see darker and lighter areas, even though it's stained. So, you know, even though this is a solid stain, I think it does tick our box of being able to, you know, it doesn't look like a piece of plastic all of a sudden, which could sometimes happen when you paint wood. It just, the wood completely disappears. Now, the benefit from staining as well is that over time, the maintenance is gonna be easier compared to paint, because we could just keep adding layers on top of the stain. And instead of the paint will start to flake if you're not careful, and you might have to sand it all and then apply a new coat. It also protects the wood from moisture being able to get into it. And that's important because we've decided to make the boards go all the way to the bottom here. So if we didn't have any stain there, snow and rain will just hit this all the time and it will start wearing it out. So
yeah, we were kind of discussing whether we wanted to put like a metal bottom or something, and that's an option for folks too.
We did a bunch of things in Photoshop to make it look like that, but this barn is so tall, it just looks really grand when the boards go all the way from the bottom to the top. So
now, can you, just for reference for folks who haven't seen the earlier video, understand why there's zip sheeting on this side and we're not doing it on the others?
So the first stage of this renovation was actually building a wood shop inside of this barn. So part of this was actually a break room. And then the other half of this was a room where they would dump soil. I mean, this had the bones, but it didn't have drywall or anything. It just had some plywood on the walls. And the first stage was taking that all out, making a wood shop in here that is 40 by 14. And I put some windows in there. I took the garage door out and we actually made this door that just swings open like this. Because then instead of having all those garage door tracks on the ceiling, now it's a lot easier to open and close.
Yeah, we don't have all the hardware for it yet.
Plus, this is all insulated. And to get an insulated garage door that's 10 by 10, we were getting quotes for like $7,000 to $8,000 to do that. So I was like, well, that's a lot of money. Can I build my own doors and just insulate it like a wall? So these are basically just walls. And they have the same treatment as far as like the zip sheeting on it. Now, all the windows and doors in this building, we reused from the house up there. The common house up on the hill, we replaced the doors and the windows to triple pane because we wanted to make it more energy efficient, because windows were the largest, like there were 5 by 5 foot windows in that building, and we're just losing a lot of heat through that. So we upgraded those windows, and instead of throwing the old windows away, they're perfectly fine for a wood shop. This is heated, but you know, in the winter it might get heated to 55 or 60. You can see here that the seal is broken on some of the windows. So what you'll get is that there's condensation in between the glass. So this water here, you can't get off. It's not on the inside or the outside, it's between the two planes of glass. So I have to figure out how to deal with that. Maybe I'll cut a hole in the glass and like blow air in it and then seal it again. I don't know. I'll have to figure out how to deal with that.
I mean, it's not the biggest deal in the world, is it?
No, it's not. I don't really care, but it's not really a nice entrance. And some of the other issues with these doors is that this door was smaller. A traditional door is 80 by 36. This door was like 34 wide, so I had to make the opening smaller. And it wasn't tall enough. So I actually had to add a little piece on the bottom here. You might be able to see. And I just upgraded some of the gaskets, like some of the seals and stuff. I had to rebuild this frame around it because that was completely shot from the other building when we pulled it out. And you know, I made some metal overhangs here so that this wood never rots. And we're also building another overhang over this whole thing so it's better protected because the rain always comes in and hits this corner. You could even see how dirty it is from just rain splashing here.
Yeah, well, we're gonna be putting gutters on this and everything, which just didn't have gutters before.
So I built the windowsill here. Let's show some of the details here. I put this windowsill on and then I put a little metal piece here so that this wood would never rot. And it sticks out a little bit, and that's because the boards will eventually go like this. So the battens will go on first, and then the boards will come in. And the result is that after planing the boards and batten, they were more like 7/8 of an inch instead of an inch. So total, that would be like 1 3/4 or something. So this actually sticks out another quarter so that it protrudes from the building a little bit, which is kind of nice. And my metal trim here is 2 inches as well, so that sticks out. This is just a really interesting way to do your framing or around the window, because usually what you do is you would do what we did on the meadow house. You would just get a flat piece and overlay it on top of the board and batten to kind of hide the imperfections. We'll show you a shot of that over there in the meadow house. But in this case, we actually flipped those and made it come out. And that way you have a different way of doing it. And you'll get these really thin edges around the window. And the windows will feel like they're inset, which is kind of a nice look as well. We wanted to have, obviously, a stain on the outside. And I think this color is called rustic taupe. And it's a Benjamin Moore color. They can really make any color solid stain, but we like that one because it has the look of an aged hemlock building, but with a little warmth in it as well.
Mm-hmm. It looks really nice set in the landscape.
Yeah, and we decided to leave the backside untreated because then on the inside we will get a natural finish like that.
Yeah, and since it's on the inside, it'll age very slowly.
Yeah, and it won't get exposed to moisture, so it should be fine. Now, ideally, you want to stain the whole board so it has an equal, because as soon as you put paint or stain on wood, it changes the permeability for moisture. So moisture penetrates easier here than it does here, so that could cause, the drying process to be different, and it could warp the board. I'm not worried about it because we're screwing this down to a building. And
it's been dried for over a year.
And it's very dry wood. And as you can see, we have very minimal rain right now. It's not too bad. But, if I put these boards, yesterday I nailed these boards on with some brad nails just to keep them in place. But if I don't screw them in the next couple of days, they will start to move on their own and do funny things. So, the idea is today to get the boards on and to then just screw everything off, because that will really lock it in place every 2 feet, 2 screws. And then putting screws on the edge, like 1.5 inches in to the board. And then one thing that you don't see here yet is that we're gonna put spacers in between all the battens. So up there you can kind of see it. So it just brings the space that's in between the battens to the same level as the battens itself. So that over time, you know, if I screwed 2 screws in here and my board would start to warp, it might become like a hammock because it has space to actually indent. Another thing we did when we planed the wood is we paid attention to the wood grain, making sure that it's always this way, where the core of the tree is outside. Because what happens when this starts to warp is that the growth ring starts to contract. And as they contract, it bends the wood this way. So I paid attention to that so that if these boards ever start warping, they will never cup and pull away from the battens. They will always bow and push their edges to the battens, making a tighter seal. And now that it's all planed and it's all flat, we get a really nice tight reveal here where barely any water will get through. We have about a 3/4 inch overlap between our battens and our boards.
Yeah, and yesterday you were putting the metal up there, and do you want to say what you scared out?
Oh yeah. So I was putting this metal trim here. So let's grab a little piece of that metal. So yeah, this is a piece of the metal that we used. You look on this side, you can kind of see. So it's 2 inches out and then 5/8 down. And what this does is it protects the end grain of the wood. So as the boards sit here, you know, you can imagine that when the boards sit underneath, their end grain is protected from moisture, and it will help get water that gets behind the siding here. The water will hit the metal, go in front of the boards and drip out instead of staying behind the boards. That's why the metal is there. But as I was screwing the metal on, I actually, some animal just all of a sudden like raced out of the gap that was like up there behind the, you know, behind the boards. And I was like, what kind of bird was that? And it looked like some kind of bat wing. And I saw it sitting on the ground over there, and I told Summer, go take a look at it, and it was an actual bat.
Little brown bat.
Like a little brown bat, just one of them, that found a little place to nest, or to sleep, I guess, behind that tiny little board up there.
Yeah, and we actually bought a bat house for this barn specifically,
Yes.
And we said, well, now we know where we're going to put the bat house.
So I think the perfect place for a bat house would be right there, because that bat told us that's where it should go.
Yeah, they like east and southeast and south facing. So he was basically in that corner, which is east, but then the south is over here. So he's getting the warmth of the south as well.
Yeah.
So that was a perfect experience. And that just also goes to show you, and I shared this with Sonder yesterday, that by doing wood, you actually do provide habitat as opposed to metal, which you're not going to get any of our native mason bees. You
surprisingly
get bats.
We actually saw a tree frog sitting on the metal. I don't know how he does that, but he was like 14 feet up on this building, on metal, just holding on. But yeah, I think I've been working with this wood for quite a while, and I see a lot more insects coming to check it out, or even just ants crawling on it. This is definitely a more interesting kind of surface for wildlife. And I also have like little things like this, like screw holes, and I just know that a little bee is gonna come in and make a little nest in there at some point. So yeah, it's great for that as well. But yeah, this metal is a piece that we're using to keep the siding as flat as possible, because sometimes what people use in order to just get rid of that water is they'll have their boards like this, but then the next row of boards, they will just get put right on top of it. So then water that gets behind the top board will be on the front of the board underneath. But that creates a offset in the wood. And I didn't really want to do that because our overhangs are very tiny here. It's just the standard, maybe 1 foot overhang or 16 inches overhang. And by the time we put this wood on, it's already taken up 2 inches. So, you have a little left. So if I were to do another 2 inches in front of that, there would be very little overhang left. So another thing that we're doing on this this side with the zip sheeting. So the zip sheeting, this green stuff here, what that does is it prevents water from getting into the building. So it makes a watertight enclosure and also an airtight enclosure, which makes it easier to heat it and to make it airtight in there so that the heat doesn't leave the building. But the problem is like we don't want to just put wood right up against it, because if water ever gets to the back of that, it won't dry out. So what I did here is we have a little air gap behind that. But the problem is, if I leave that air gap open, you're just gonna have bats or insects or other animals get in there. And if you look at this...
We're okay with having them, but they need to be in a designated place.
Yeah, so imagine if I were to just put this board on. There's this huge gap here on the bottom for insects to crawl in.
Which is what we had before, yeah.
Yeah. So what I've...
Or mice or anything.
Or mice, they can get behind here. There's enough space for a mice there if it's 2 inches of space. So, so what I did here is these spacers, it's basically corrugated plastic that has a little screen mesh here on the bottom. And, once this board sits in front of it like this, airflow can get underneath here and it will create some kind of a chimney stack effect where the hot air will leave on the top and it will draw new air in from the bottom, helping it to dry out. So that's one detail that we had to do here in order to make sure that our building will last. This barn is so large of a project that we're just doing it in steps. So the first step was getting the wood shop finished, because then I could start building other things like a kitchen for that house and just pieces of furniture here and there. A place to work. The second stage is recladding it and painting it. So that's what we're doing now. And in the future, what we like to do is, and I might actually get to this part in this phase, is I want to build a trellis off of here. So we have this bump out here. Compared to all the other stuff, this bump out had to be here because there's water coming into the building here, and there's like a room behind here that's insulated. If there's ever no power or no heat, this room can be heated with like a light bulb, because that would give off enough heat. Well, if there's no power, then you won't have your light bulb, but it's gonna be insulated enough to prevent things from freezing. So I'm probably gonna store paint in here and stuff like that. And this bump out kind of gave me the idea to build like a closet here with 2 doors, and coming off of that, a trellis that kind of helps cover this side a little bit from the extreme southern facing sunlight. It also gives me an opportunity to put overhangs over these doors and this window here to protect them better from the rain. So the idea is to build a trellis that comes off the building like 18 inches, so not that far, about as far as this post here. And it'll be very symmetric. And on this side there will be a door, and on this side there's no door, so we'll put a planter, similar to what we did with the meadow house. And in that planter, Summer will be able to tell you what she's gonna plant there that will crawl all over this barn. Hopefully that will also give a lot more character to the barn.
Yeah, make it look like it sits in the landscape a bit better, because I think the problem with the barn for me was that it was just like a sore thumb in the landscape. Didn't look like, it just looked like it got dropped in here by some kind of alien spaceship, and then it was just didn't fit in. But now that we're really transforming the meadow and everything, we want to really make this kind of like a hanging gardens, but we also want to be able to stain it every year. So we have to grow the plants on it in a manner that doesn't hinder the staining process in the future too. The trellis is a solution to that.
Yeah, if you have the plant growing right on the building, it's going to be really hard to do maintenance on it. So. And
then what else are we gonna plan to do?
In the future, hopefully, this area here is kind of empty. It's just a giant wall.
And it's south facing.
There's so much space here in front of it that this would be the ideal spot for like a greenhouse. You can imagine just a greenhouse coming off of here with a sloped roof, terminating somewhere around here, and maybe have a knee wall here with some windows, and then the roof starts at maybe my height, and it goes all the way up to where that door is potentially. And it would be a huge growing space, and it would be southern facing. It'd be a great spot for a greenhouse. And it has such great access with all the roads and paths around it. So that's an idea for this side. On the other side of this building, we're imagining a giant lean-to that will help maybe park some of our vehicles and stuff in the shade and out of the rain. Also, this whole project has been possible by having this freaking lift.
Thank you, Pat and Penny.
Our neighbors like lended us this, is that how you say it?
Lent us.
They lent us this lift.
They're
And-
like the parents we've never had. Where the lift is right now, that's where a lot of our raised bed growing space we think is going to
Oh yeah, there's a
happen.
huge area here where we can put all kinds of plant beds and stuff like that. Now then on this side is where we want that lean-to to come off. This will be a future project, but you can imagine all that space down there will be covered. You know, one of the other things that we haven't talked about is that before we did all this work, we had our other neighbor, Matt, help us actually prepared a site around it.
Yeah, we didn't really plan on that, but
This used to have a huge issue with water here where all the water would just come down and sit here. It used to be a huge bowl.
it looked like a moat.
Like a giant pond. And what he did is he just cut this huge trench around the building. You can see it here. This stone here tells you where it is. And it has just a giant drain that makes everything go out to the ditch near the road. So
But tell everyone what happened.
as we were digging, we hit our internet line. And we were really afraid to cut it right there because that's where we were crossing it. But as he was going here, we accidentally hit it. And, you know, we had to fix that. It was a huge mess.
I mean, he just nicked it, and I almost cried a little bit because
I almost cried
the
because
1,000-foot trench was like my most hated job of actually fishing through. So if you look, I'll link to that episode of fishing through the internet line. But you had some foresight because you had enough line.
Well, here's the problem. If this was an Ethernet cable, fine, you'll just cut it and, you know, connect it together again. Since this distance is so long, it needed to be fiber optics. And there's two types of fiber cable, multi-mode and single mode. Single mode is really thin. That's what your ISP provider uses. Multi-mode is a little bigger and it's for distances like 1,000 feet. So we have one of those in the ground. And you buy those pre-terminated, meaning the ends are terminated already. You can't just cut, because these fiber cables are like 1/10 of the human hair thickness. Like, it's ridiculous. You can't just go and splice that and put a connector on it. So you buy these pre-terminated so that you can just pull the whole line and then plug it in and then you're good. But if you break it in the middle, how are you gonna fix that? So I was literally sitting here crying because that freaking thing broke. And our amazing company, Hafley, who provides the internet here in the area, they came out and within 2 to 3 hours, they patched it, they fixed it. Their machine that welds the 2 fiber connections together, I know it can do single mode, but I don't know if it does multi-mode, because those fiber optics or the fiber cables, they're thicker. But they were able to make it work. They were able to splice it and repair it, and thank God it all works again. The speeds are the same, and it's honestly a miracle.
Yeah,
Fiber cables on their own are a miracle.
You had
the way they
enough
fixed it is
at
a
the
miracle.
end to be able to pull through, and like luckily, and I also have to say, even though Matt nicked it, he was on the phone with Hafley immediately and took care of it.
They got it fixed.
So
very professional.
Kudos to everybody, because the customer service was phenomenal.
Yeah. It's sometimes hard to find, like in rural areas, it's hard to find reliable labor or even just skilled labor. But, these guys, they really did an amazing job. And without them, I don't think we would have been screwed.
And total pros. And Matt, that was like the major job we hired him for here. 21 years old.
Yeah, so what did he do? So he dug that trench. Another thing he did.
Well, part of it was your fault, because you lost the thing where it showed where the internet was. So you're only kind of guessing.
Here's what I should have done. I should have called my internet provider, because they have one of those tracing devices. And I should have had them trace it before. But, like Summer said, we didn't really realize that we needed to have this done, because it was somewhat okay before this, but it really just needed new gravel and everything. So I should have had the guys come out, trace the line properly, and then, the problem is like, as you look this way, my trench, I came in and I had to, my trench went a little bit to the right here. And as Matt was digging this trench, he went a little bit to the left to avoid this tree. So as these two things happened, that's where he just grabbed it with the edge of his bucket. And once you grab it with the edge of the bucket.
And the bucket's not a surgical tool.
No, that thing just rips through it doesn't even notice that line is there.
Yeah.
So it just pulled it apart.
So we're gonna replace these doors, right? Or are we gonna paint them, or what are we gonna do?
These doors, garage doors, are expensive. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna keep this door and the other door, because what's great about garage doors is they're automated, and they're already installed. Why take them out? But this door is in terrible shape. We just gotta clean it, and I'm gonna take this off and replace it. This crappy whatever it is. Ugh. So, and then we're taking this metal off and just keeping the wood as is. Just paint that. This door will be yellow.
Bold.
Yellow is like, if we didn't have Photoshop and we weren't able to see what it looked like before we started on it, I would have been a little skeptical about the yellow and if it would work or not. But seeing it in the Photoshopped image, I think it nicely balances out. It adds some welcoming color to the building.
My mom was even skeptical, and she has a yellow Jeep, so that kind of matches it.
Kind of tells you.
So, but it
is kind of bold, you could see it.
Bold, but then when you're up top on the landscape and you see the early goldenrod coming out and the brown purplish heads of the grass, it fits right in.
One other thing that the reason for doing this project is it's like a sore thumb that sticks out of our landscape. And making it these colors, where we're making it basically the color of bark, and using yellow to highlight certain elements, it makes it more subtle in the landscape. Being that this is such a big building, that really helps with the aesthetics of the whole property. And especially if we start growing plants on it, a lot of plants and flowers, they have yellow in them, and it will just really blend in. So I'm really excited to see this all finished. And that's where we're at with the barn. So
Yep.
hopefully today we can put some boards on, and that will give us an idea of what it will look like when it's finished. I think the huge time-consuming parts of this was preparing all the wood, planing it, cutting it to width, painting it. And then the other huge time suck in this project was making all the doors and the windows and painting them. Because like you could buy a door, the door's expensive. I figured it was like $700 to $800 extra on top of the price of a door to have it in the right color that you want, which is a very limited set of colors that you can pick from, let alone doing colors that are double, like one color on the outside and another color on the inside. So saving $800 on a door by painting it ourselves is, you know, strategies we've used to keep this affordable. And it's a little bit of extra work, but I have the paint sprayer already, and I need to match other windows and doors. Like, you know, there's no other way to match that as close.
And you could see how smooth of a finish that sprayer does as well.
Oh yeah, it's like factory finish. And this is called Benjamin Moore Command Paint. And it's basically a commercial paint that they use. They can spray it on concrete. You can paint anything.
And it washes very easily too.
You could scrub on this without leaving too much of a mark. By using high quality products, we're hoping that the maintenance aspect and the longevity of the building will, you know, perform really well. So.
Well, thank you, Sander, and to be continued because we're going to be working on the boards today.
Yes.
Stay tuned for the somewhat finished product by the end of this year.
Can't believe the time is here, but the barn is finished. Sort of finished, because obviously we have 100 other ideas that we want to implement on this barn, but we have to cut it off somewhere. And I think this is a good place to stop the project for now, and we'll pick it up later in smaller projects. But I'll show you what's new since the last update. We got some handles on this door now, some really beefy handles. You can find stuff like this on Etsy, and I think it's handmade. And it's just really good quality stuff. This is gonna be out here in the rain and in the sun, so I want this to be good quality. I also finished off sealing the entire door so that no bugs and insects can get in and no cold air can get in, because it is an insulated space. We're gonna have some more bird boxes on this building, maybe over here, right? What kind of box did you get, Summer?
Barn owl.
A barn owl box. So that will be an update. We got gutters, which is a huge plus because there always used to be this drip line here. And when it rains and you come out the door and you have that like rain trickling down your head, it's not good.
We're probably gonna have to cut a little.
Yeah, this is not great. So initially our idea was to combine the gutters and put all the water on that side of the building. That requires you to have like the gutter traveling across the side, or, you know, it wasn't really ideal to have it go through the building either. So I'm gonna have to dig a trench here at some point that brings it out to the road, but for now this will do. And yeah, you can see it's starting to erode some of this away. Now eventually we want to put a planter here and maybe even go around the corner with it, have a bench here and another smaller planter, and kind of to continue the extrusion from the shed, have like a trellis frame go around it so that summer can grow this yellow vine trumpet creeper on it. So that'll be interesting, but we didn't do that right now because it would just be a lot of work and not really a priority. The shed is somewhat finished, although I still need to get some handles for this, but it does work. So this is how we can get to like electrical. That'd be a little shed for some shovels or whatever, you know. So that'd be good. So I'm happy that that works. What I basically did is I had the frame and I just screwed it in place in 2 spots and then put the hinges on and then cut the screws, and all of a sudden the door works. So that's a cool technique, but it doesn't always work super perfect, so I had to adjust some things, but it's easy enough to do.
We should be getting the handles soon too.
Yep, and then we got our garage doors with windows. So some of the panels, well, one of the panels was dented on the bottom. So we asked the garage door company, hey, can we just swap that panel out for a window and then put it up higher? And they were able to do that. So now we have some light in this barn, and that's especially nice in the winter because if these doors are closed, you know, it's gonna be nice to have some light in there other than just LED light. And these doors here also have windows at the top, and that will let a lot of light in, because you may have seen some of this light come into the meadow house at the end of the day, where it's just this golden rays that just make it over that hill, and they reach really far into the barn. So this will be really exciting at the end of the day, because you know, you get all that natural light. And in the morning, the light will be in my wood shop. During the day, it will fall into the middle of the room through those big windows over there. And at the end of the day, it will be this. And the view is really interesting from here because you just kind of see all the treetops here and the sky. So it's like, it's a really peaceful view. So again, here we have a gutter. And this area used to be just flooded with water. It would just be a bowl. So we put this drain in, and this gutter gets all the water that would fall down from the roof. It gets it all the way over that side of the building, drops it straight into this trench, and it won't ever touch this area, which is great, because then never have problems with flooding again. Yeah, and I still have to finish this a bit. It's not ideal how this is currently situated, but the gutter extends down in the pipe. So I'm gonna cut the pipe below the ground level and then connect the pipe to the gutter and then bury it. And then the gutter will look like it just goes into the ground like that.
You wanna talk about this and some of the wood holes?
Well, yeah, so last little details that are done here. This is gonna be a ventilation system, like a fresh air system for the office, wood shop in here. So currently I have it taped off so that no bugs get in there. And then there's all these little knot holes into the wood that we need to fill up. And I found this epoxy putty that acts like wood when it, you know, cures. So I'm gonna put that in there, but I haven't gotten to that yet. But if we don't do that, I think mice, bugs, they'll all, even maybe birds, they'll get in there and mess around with the space that's behind the siding, because there's about 2 inches of space behind this wood. On that side where there's no wood shop, it's just the inside of the barn, so they'll just be able to get in. Now, in the future, what are we thinking of doing? let's talk about it. We can't really do anything of it yet because it's either too expensive or we just don't have the time for it. So in the future, we want to put a hex sign up there in the gable end, just to give it a little bit of something there, because right now it's just so empty. And it will be a very iconic thing. This is facing the road, so you know, it will be it's like kind of a name, the name of the barn, but in a visual. I kind of think of it that way. Then as we go around, we imagine that trellis here with some benches so you can enjoy this morning sunlight. The gutter will have to go through the planter. And then on this side, Summer has a big vision to eventually build a greenhouse coming off this side of the barn. And it will probably go up to about where that road is. So it doesn't block the road, but it would go up to it. I think that would be a great addition.
Raised beds in front.
Eventually some raised beds over here in this huge area. But we might have to put a septic tank down there too. So we'll have to determine what to do first. But that's still on the bucket list. And ideally we like to improve the roof as well. Standing seam metal would be nice on the roof, but that's also very expensive.
And cupolas.
And we like to do some cupolas on there because it would be really, we have a second story up there where you can go up with the stairs. So, you know, you could one day walk up the stairs, climb a little more, and you'll be inside the cupola, and you can have this entire panoramic view of the land, which would be really cool. But again, it's very high up. I'm not sure how to build that, and it requires us to cut a hole in the roof. So that will probably happen at the same time that the roof will be replaced. But you know, this roof has a lot of years left in it, so we might just leave this for, you know, another 5 to 10 years.
What about the north side?
On the north side, which is the shaded side there, since this might have a greenhouse, it would be nice to do something on the other side as well. So it'd be kind of two lean-tos on the barn, giving the barn a little bit more, like, yeah, some wings, basically. We talked about this barn being very commercial and like just plain. And by adding a lot of these things, like adding a shed, adding a greenhouse, we're gonna add a lot more character to the barn, and it makes it much more enjoyable to hang out in. And we might eventually, like I mentioned, putting a septic here, we might eventually put some bathroom utilities in here for if we do tours here or we have guests come over and they need to use the restroom, they could do that in the barn. But unfortunately right now we don't really have that set up. So that's where we landed with the barn. So
Thank you, Sonder.
We'll be working on more of our indoor renovations throughout the winter months here at Flock. So if you'd like to keep up to date with our projects, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and show us some support by becoming a channel member. In the meantime, we'll see you in the next video.